Hello, my name is Annika Lundkvist. I'm the founder of Pedestrian Space at pedestrianspace.org, which is a platform and an NGO devoted to issues of walkability and urban resilience. And we're here today because I am what is called an ambassador for a Horizon-funded project called Plus Change. And I'm here today with Kati, who's also an ambassador for the Plus Change project. Just to let you know what that is, it is at pluschange.eu if you want to look it up online. Plus Change is funded by the Horizon Europe program and aims to develop strategies and decision-making processes for land use that effectively address challenges related to climate change, biodiversity, and human well-being. So the ambassador structure for this project, Plus Change, is very innovative. Shout out to the Plus Change team that thought to do this. And they welcomed us on as ambassadors to represent different, often underrepresented topics and groups. I'm representing the theme, the topic of walkability for the project. And with these interviews, I'm meeting with fellow ambassadors and also people representing the diverse case studies, cities across Europe, to interview them about the communities they represent, how those communities are underrepresented in land use decisions, how we can amplify those communities' needs and messages. So today I'm really excited, very interested to be here with Hungary-based Kati. I have your bio here. You are an agroecology professional and small-scale farmer. I want to turn it over to you and let you just do an introduction where you can list all the diverse things you represent and are doing. So I'll turn it over to you for an introduction.
Okay, so I am an agroecology professional and a small-scale farmer, and currently I would say, two main roles. I am the president of Magház Association, which is the Hungarian network for the seed savers and the people who work for preserving agrobiodiversity in Hungary and in the Carpathian Basin. So, sorry, also in a bit of wider geographical context. And I own a small farm in the suburbs of Budapest, in the town of Páty, which is around 30 minutes, 40 minutes from the city center by car or by bus. So we really are close to the city. We are really a peri-urban area. And yes, I grow vegetables. I am active in seed saving and variety saving. So we also participate in seed swaps. And now the farm, I moved here last year. I built a house now together with the farm, the land I purchased. So now it's also becoming more of a community space in a wider sense, where we really flow into all kinds of projects connected to biodiversity, community, gastronomy, the arts. So we have these little side projects or projects that are happening in the garden. But and I would say we also sell vegetables at the local market, and I work together with, right now it's only one or two chefs and gastronomy professionals to really focus on the diversity of crops and climate change resilience in farming. So we do a lot of diverse things, and our work in the farm is also closely connected to the work of Magház Association. And I think there is one more interesting project that we are working on now in Magház that relates to the topic of land use, is that we also have a Horizon project. We are a part of a consortium for the project Co-Evolvers, and we have, which is a project focusing on nature-based solutions. And our case study or our living lab is a psychiatric hospital also in the suburbs of Budapest, where we are now doing a participatory-based planning to turn the hospital park into a healing garden. And so when I joined Plus Change, I was not yet so involved in this project. But now I really see that it's also a very interesting topic of how a common land, a common space where people are hearing, there are patients, there are workers, there are doctors, there are owners of the hospitals and the management of what kind of representations happen there, and how different points of views and different needs can be met, while also kind of trying to, pay attention to the non-living beings and or not non-human beings and then just how to plan a garden like that. So it's also a very interesting process.
I'm really glad you brought up the non-human species. That's so important too. I'm actually currently hosting an interesting podcast with a group, and we're talking to farmers and urban agriculture experts all around the world. I think it's so important when we keep bringing in that element of biodiversity, especially for urban professionals like me, because we can sometimes think of the city in this very human-centric sense, but talking to people like you who are working on, for example, peri-urban farms, therapeutic gardens, and being mindful of how habitable that is for other species is so important. First, I have so many questions, but I really want to know first what's happening at the farm right now. It's November. What's growing? What's going on at the farm?
The farm, I think I'm trying to get the season finished. We had the first frost this week, which is nice because finally I can't go to the market anymore because everything is frozen. So I get to spend some time with the garden or more time with the garden. And we are currently I have been involved with legumes for several years now. And we've been having very bad harvests these last years, both with peas and field beans and beans. So what we're trying to do now, since the winters are seemingly getting milder, we are now trialing overwintering peas and broad beans on a larger scale and actually putting them into experiments to see if maybe a November seeding can help bring forward a little bit the season, and maybe we can be faster growing peas before the summer droughts hit. So right now I'm setting up these experiments. I'm still working in the garden. The land is not frozen yet, or the soil is not frozen yet. So we had mornings we have a little white, but then it's still nice weather. So yeah, we're still working, and I'm thinking about getting ready for the Christmas markets. We still have some big pumpkins, and we're gonna package some seeds for the Christmas market. So we're trying some new things
Oh, that's so
out.
nice. That's really interesting. Also, I'll be curious to follow you. You have farm like social media pages.
We have, I think, yeah, we have an Instagram that I'm quite active. It's in Hungarian, but I see now Instagram can translate for you anything.
Mhm.
So
I'm curious about your experiments with the overwintering and the legumes. I'll be curious to follow that. I
we
know.
actually have, wait, I show you something.
Okay.
I don't have the English one, but we have this book called
Hmm.
the Chickpeas, Peas, Beans, and Lentils. And it's also in English. I can send you a link. It's an ebook, like it's a freely downloadable ebook that we made with the Institute for Organic Farming. So it's something you can download about this research that we've been doing for the past 7 years.
Okay,
I
yes,
will
I saw
send
that.
it to you.
Great, please do. And I saw that we will publish it. When we publish this, we can publish the link to your social media, everything. And I did see in your Plus Change bio the special interest in legumes. So can you share a bit how that started?
I had my farm. I was renting some land for 8 years in a neighboring village where my parents live. And I don't know how it started. I think I've been working as an agroecology freelancer by then. So people always call me with some stuff for research. And after I started to have my own land, and I got involved in these projects, mostly Horizon 2020 projects that were needing farmers, like they need also field triers, right? It's not just sector analysis all the time and not just theoretical research. So yeah, so I started in the True Legumes project, and now the two institutions that I worked with, or two companies that I work with, they both continue to have Horizon 2020 projects that are focusing either on legumes or underutilized crops. But now this work has turned into, like, now we are starting to have a network of legume growers in Hungary who are mostly small-scale farmers. And yeah, it was just an interesting thing to trial with. We started to get like 7 or 8 years ago, we got out beans from the gene bank, all kind of colorful, nice heirlooms. And we were like, okay, we're just going to multiply them. And in 3 years, we're just going to have so many beans. We're just going to take it to the restaurants and it's going to be awesome. And then we kept failing, like the crops kept failing. We couldn't multiply the seeds. And it turns out that the climate change is affecting Hungarian climate in a way that regular Phaseolus beans cannot be grown anymore because of the drought also in the air, not just in the soil. So if there's no air humidity, they cannot be fertilized, no matter how much you irrigate. So yeah, now we're doing crazy stuff like growing chickpeas by hand. We are trying now with a neighboring farm, a friend of mine. We are growing chickpeas for second year to see like, can you actually grow chickpeas on a scale that is like medium scale, but something that you can cultivate by hand. And now there are also some larger scale arable farmers who are growing chickpeas and vigna beans, these cowpeas that are more resilient towards drought. So and the green peas is something that is very traditional Hungarian crop for the last couple hundred years, and Hungary has been a very big green pea producer. It's also very popular in the market, so that's why we are trying to see what can be grown, what we need to let go of, and how maybe we can change the growing knowledge or how the growing technology to adapt to these changing conditions.
Yeah, exactly. That's what you're doing. You're adapting and leading, probably educating others in the process too, right? So
Yeah.
yeah, so you represent small scale farmers for the Plus Change Project. You represent small scale farmers, seed savers, and agroecology activists and researchers. Can you share more about why you represented these groups and the importance of that for the Plus Change Project?
I think the small scale farmer, if I'm like one of them, but also all of the seed savers in Magház Association are running farms. Either they are running self-sufficient farms for family sustenance, or they are running market farms in different kind of setups, different kind of economical marketing models. But what we really see and experience is that this kind of, I would say, micro farms, like they are, most of us are under half a hectare, which is really, how should I say, a statistically non really visible area. Lots of us work around Budapest. We have our farms in the suburbs or still within reach of Budapest in urbanizing environments, urbanizing towns. But even the ones who are living in villages are facing a lot of problems with the industrialization eating us and surrounding us and pushing us out or just simply poisoning our lands. So I think it's very important that these kind of farms can thrive and these kind of farms can multiply. But right now, to be honest, it's not such a life that I would recommend to anyone. Like it's not economically or like it's very hard to pursue. So I think it's important that we talk about these things that although it's very nice to be a farmer, but it's also very hard from a lot of perspectives. And yeah, I think I apply to Plus Change because it's a like this land use kind of topic. We also don't talk about it too much, We talk about the hardships of marketing, we talk about the hardships of climate change. But now, like the farm, if this neighboring farm is getting surrounded like each year by factories and it's, we're just like they're not you're just like waiting for, oh my God, like when is it gonna like eat it alive, like this kind of development. And also a member of our Magház Association, there is like a new iron factory building next to her garden. It means like what kind of pollution will that mean. So that's one thing. Agroecological researchers, I'm not so sure I'm representing. I've been working in this kind of interdisciplinary research for 10 years now. But I also see that whatever change we want to reach, we need to like get out of our set boundaries of, oh, I'm a biologist, I'm a farmer, I'm a social sciences studies, like these kind of like set ideas of I'm this and that, and this is what I know. Like, I think everyone needs to expand their minds a little bit concerning everything. And it's also the way how it comes in with the arts, like this year. I'm by no means an artist. I think art is something that came to me in a very similar way, like gardening did, as a mental health move. That it's something that when I do art, when I create something, or when I garden, it's something that has very positive effects on me psychologically. It's my escape, it's my therapy. And and now I just see that art is also something that brings people together around diversity, around food, around plants and animals. And it's just like this. I think there is like all these really different ways of how we can address the very varying issues of food and climate and inhabiting land.
Yeah, that's really interesting. Yeah, my mind perked up earlier when you were introducing yourself and you mentioned how, well, you're a small scale farmer, but also involved in arts and gastronomy. I love that. That's really interesting. And I like how you say also that we think many of us should be expanding our mind. And I think the way I interpreted what you said is like we all have our expertise or what we represent, but also make connections, go transdisciplinary and I think that's where a lot of rich stuff happens. Back to the land use, it's definitely concerning with the encroachment on land and then the concerns about pollution. I think from what I understand for urban agriculture, one of the biggest challenges is addressing the pollution, right? It's if we want to grow more food in cities, we have to address how polluted our soils and everything. So can you share from your own knowledge, your background with the farming, and also connecting to the Plus Change project, what can we look at maybe as some inspiration for land use, but also some of the really diverse challenges that we're facing with land use and urban agriculture? To
I
include
think,
very urban. Yeah.
yeah, urban agriculture I find really interesting because of this hyper locality that it presents. But also, yes, the question of pollution, of can you really eat what you're growing in an empty field in the middle of the city, in the parking lot, even if you bring in some soy, like what about the smog that ends up on your plants? Those are interesting things. And also, I think how it connects with like here we are quite low tech. Like we do most of our farming by hand, by human labor. But I also think high-tech solutions are an interesting question. Like, what about vertical farming? What about, growing microgreens in the cellars of London? Like, I find those, I think that since like this kind of like innovative spirit is, and a lot of young people are present in urban areas and they bring this kind of new thoughts and ideas to the table, I'm not one to like completely wash off high tech or technological innovations because I think they're quite interesting of what they can bring to the table as of like food security or allowing fresh food to be grown right there in the city. But I also think that peri-urban agriculture, so this like suburban agriculture should have a lot bigger role. I'm I cannot say about other European cities and other European countries, but I'm pretty sure there's very few places in Europe where it lives up to its potential, that there's so much lawn, there's so much grass, and so much, how do you say it in English? Like so many abandoned yards that are just big enough to have a vegetable garden. And and I see it here also in my town. It's a town of 8,000 people. I am the only vegetable farmer, and there are two or three more bigger farmers, and there are some people who keep horses. But I think there is under 20 families who have anything to do with agriculture in this town, you know? And and I think that's a shame because traditionally this area used to be wine growing and fruits and a lot of like vegetables. And I'm really curious about how can we get back to that. And but it just seems to me that the people who want to grow food are the young people who cannot really afford a property here. Like I'm really lucky in the sense of like being financially able to afford a plot in this town because it is not a place where you can normally buy anything if you cannot sell an apartment in the city, you know, if you start from zero. And then the people who are want to start farming, they sometimes end up in either by choice or by financial necessity in very secluded areas of the country when there it's very hard to access urban markets with their products. And then they can also be like, for me, it's also, I think, the fact that we can be so uh, embedded in community and that we can have such nice network of people and people coming here all the time and that we have community events all the time, even when they're not like, how do you say, like very formal events. It's just like friends meeting, like it's a place for people to meet and connect. It's because we are close to the city. It's because people can just jump on a bus and they are here in 40 minutes. So if you're more far away, I think you're also a bit secluded from this kind of connection. So then you need to have people to like stay overnight. You need to provide a space where they can spend the evening, you know, so it gets more complicated when it's not a day trip anymore. There are also people who are trying to create such spaces far away from urban centers where you can stay over and have a co-working space and volunteer on the farm. So there are good things, but yes, I think locality also matters.
Okay, so I have a few takeaways as I'm listening to you because I'm also learning. And by the way, disclaimer, I started my own first vegetable garden this year on my balcony. I'm
Okay.
in a formerly industrial, transformed to a monofunctional business area, and now is transforming to a residential area. Not so, despite the fact that it was, you know, some decades ago, completely rural and agricultural, it's very much like business, residential area. But I grew corn on my balcony. This year, for the first time, I grew diverse vegetables. So in my mind, I need more space because I want to grow a lot of things. So I listen to you on a very personal level. I think, okay, I probably need to be in a suburban or peri-urban area to do the growing I want to do. But now, if we want to talk about, yeah, small scale farmers and other people who maybe want to do substantial gardening, whether it's for sustaining your family, which I think is extremely important. Imagine if people, yeah, return to growing more to feed their family. So what I'm taking away listening to you, the power of the peri-urban, that's what I'm calling it, the power of the peri-urban.
Yeah, I think that's a good one.
Yeah, the proximity to the urban context, like the city itself, is for you go to markets there. The economic potential is great, right? To be able to sell your stuff. And then there's the community potential. I like that you brought that up. So when you have events, people can easily come. It's like a little adventure probably for them. The locality, and then also the land. Of course, there's just more space in the peri-urban context,
Yeah.
right? Okay, so those are some good takeaways. And earlier, I mean, in the very beginning, you already talked about drought, right, and climate change, which is obviously a huge factor. I was in Hungary this past summer, it was very hot. I think there
Oh,
was
yeah.
a drought in all of Central Europe, right? So obviously that's impacting you. You already talked about how it's impacted your bean growing. That was very interesting to hear about and learn about. Personally don't know, but there's so much to be learned about. And one thing that's pulling me to urban agriculture is this issue of food literacy and being more connected and learning about, well, yeah, what does that mean that a fasola bean is no longer adapting and a chickpea is more adaptive to the changing. I mean, this is really serious, important knowledge for our species. Um, and if we're going to depend on local agriculture as well in the future. which I think is a huge part of sustainable communities. So can you share anything more about that climate change, resilience in local farming, how it's impacting you in your local region, more ways
Yeah.
you're seeing that you have to adapt?
I think what we're seeing is quite interesting because small scale farmers, like this very small scale permaculture, agroecological, organic, you call yourself whatever you want, or biodynamic. I think are seen as the crazies a little bit in the farming community. We are economically not really, economically, statistically speaking, we're not really existing. From other farmers, from the neighbors, sometimes you looked at the crazy person because your garden is weedy and like what's all that stuff. But I think what we see now is the crazies seem to have some results that are different. I think there is a good example, for example, with the no-till agriculture and the cover crops and this kind of stuff. Those arable farmers were really seen as crazy people 5, 10 years ago, and now their conferences are full. And there are waiting lists to get into the conference to listen to the practices they are using because they are actually their corn is growing and other farmers' corn is not growing. So I think it's getting a little bit similar now with this kind of diverse agriculture for vegetable farming, because when you have a big diversity of crops, when you have a big diversity of even planting times. So if I have peas that I plant the same peas in November, I plant them again in March and then in May, one of them will turn out maybe okay. And then if I have a big diversity of different crops and different varieties and different oh, I'm going to plant this in the shade now, I'm going to plant that in the sun. Let's see what happens. What can I grow in the field that I cannot irrigate that much? What will survive there? So it's a constant experimentation and a constant adaptation by diversity. Not everything will work out fine. And I think the beans are, for a lot of us, a very sad example because uh, I love colorful beans. I know that the chefs and the consumers love colorful beans. It's something that is traditionally embedded in our gastronomic heritage. A good bean stew, like a good lentil stew. No one can grow lentils anymore, but yeah, we need to. And then, sorry guys, there's chickpeas now, and then we actually find out that chickpeas are not a brand new thing in Hungarian gastronomy and farming, but it was such a long time ago, so many hundreds of years ago, that people were growing chickpeas that nobody remembers it anymore because it was before they started writing farming books and cookbooks. So it's this kind of adaptation and experimentation, I think, that's really interesting with diversity and makes us actually able to adapt. And now when we write these kind of publications about or research, even bigger farmers, ooh, that's interesting. Maybe I should try it. Maybe I should try it on a bigger scale. And we see it that, okay, first it's always the crazies who are okay developing new because they tried a lot of things. They tried 10 different things and then one thing worked. And then they can say, okay, I figured it out, guys. This is how you grow chickpeas in this scale with this machinery. So yeah, I think it's going to spread by necessity because when, like, of course, there is a segment of farmers who are only looking at the financial bottom line of how many EU funds and land-based funds and whatever I can get and how much money I can get out per hectare. But I don't think that's necessarily the majority of farmers. Farmers want to farm, farmers want to grow things, and I think they can be really adaptable once they know what to do. So yeah, and I think what we're seeing now, I think in the Horizon projects as well, is that this kind of mentality is already present at the level of research on the European level. And we hope that in a couple of years that will translate to policy and the support system of who gets money, like who gets support for transitioning to new kinds of methods. And it's not just organic farming. It's just like can you get finance to do experiments on your farm to figure out what will happen, you know? And but again, I think again I'm in a very lucky position because I have a degree from Wageningen in agroecology, so I kind of really speak this kind of language. I speak English. I can, you know, really participate in designing this kind of research and participate in providing data, and I can write a report. So I think that's that's quite unique. But how can you really, like, I'm always, because it's a problem we see now that we it's hard to find these farmers who are, you know, like to experiment, who like to, but it's also how much can we pay them to like give up part of their working hours and part of their lands to do experiments, because often it's to be honest, often it is voluntary work, and your your price is maybe you get some packages of seed, your price is you get access to some knowledge, but it's actual work, you know, like that has to be, I think, financially compensated, and it's often not the case in even in these horizon projects. So it's interesting questions of how to bring this forward, but it's definitely something that this diversity is making it possible to find new ways. And then gastronomy is something that just really, again, in the city, it's something that can raise attention to these issues. When you say, okay, it's a bean stew, but it's made of chickpeas because, guys, this is what we could grow last year, then you can have a discussion with the consumers and the people who are, okay, maybe they're there for the chef who has a good name, who they like him. He makes good food, he makes nice plates, and it's very Instagrammable to be there. But also while you're there, you're learning something new about climate change and beans. So
I think that's the future. I think that is so important for I love that you brought up gastronomic heritage because this, first of all, I really enjoy talking to you because I'm crazy about vegetables. First of all, I love vegetables. I'm into plant-based cuisine, and I love this about gastronomic heritage. I was in Budapest last summer, and actually before I went, as a tourist, that's what I was Googling. I was Googling like farm to table stuff in the city. I wanted to go to places that would showcase gastronomic heritage as well as local ingredients. I That's what I wanted to support as
did
a
you
tour.
find it?
I'll talk to you after the after I have
Okay.
food. We'll talk after the segment about because I also had multiple family members with me and everything, so we had to kind of cater to everybody. But I had some good food. I don't know necessarily if all the ingredients were local, but I definitely got into the gastronomic heritage. I didn't make it to the farm to table restaurants. I think that were on my agenda. Um, but then I also thought of seasonality. Like if I really want to experience Hungarian gastronomic heritage. Maybe there's certain times of the year also that could be interesting to go. The drought really concerned me. You mentioned something earlier too that lentils are no longer possible.
It's also a question of drought and heat. Lentils is interesting because lentils were Hungary was a very, very uh, how should I say, big and important lentil producer in the world up until the 90s. Um, and then um, and then by now lentil production is basically zero. It's non-existent because of Canada and Turkey really pushing forward with their lentil production, but also because it was not more economically viable. There was no more breeding programs, and now there are some efforts being made to make again lentils that can be sown in late autumn, that can be harvested before the big heats come. So yeah, it's these kind of changes are of course also pushing breeding efforts, but yeah. The big breeding institutes like the national institutes are also not in a great place. Like they are being dismantled, and even the varieties that are already present from the 70s or 80s are some of them are disappearing because the ones maintaining them. So it's I feel a little bit like all this effort is a little bit against, you know, how should I say, like against the paradigm, like Hungary. Hungarian agriculture on the level of the government, Hungarian agriculture on the level of the Chamber of Agriculture, that we are all producers are, forced to be a part of. We need to pay a membership fee, and or interests are not necessarily represented, because industrialization, more and more large scale monocropping, and very, how should I say, technologically advanced, and a lot of yes, the system is favoring large actors, and the system is favoring non-di going against diversity. It's going towards uniformizing agriculture as much as possible, which is, now we see, this is not really the answer to these issues. Like, you have to be really hyper locally adapted to your environment. And yeah, we'll see what happens for 2 more years when the corn doesn't grow bigger than your knees, because this year was again a year like that. Like, you drove through the countryside in some areas, and you saw cornfields dried out completely. It was like a fire has went through them, like how many seasons can you have like that before you say, oh, maybe we need to change something?
Yeah, exactly. You said that earlier too, that you think we're going to have to really change out of necessity. I agree with you. Unfortunately, there's going to be a lot of situations like that, I feel, where we're really being forced to change. And it's actors like you, who I appreciate that you explained your background too, and that you're kind of uniquely positioned to help support with these transitions. And I also appreciate you brought up the question, who gets support for transitions to new methods at EU levels. I'm glad that you're an ambassador for this project. I hope to see you leading many more projects, because I feel you are exactly the kind of person to be at the forefront
Thank
of
you.
such change. Yes, and helping others, because there's, as you know better than I do, because you're in it, many other farmers across Europe and the world who are dealing with similar issues, maybe different, different crops, but similar issues. So to round off, to end this off, I would like to end on a somewhat visionary note, but I never want to avoid the topic of challenges, because in order to succeed and thrive, we have to know how to deal with the challenges. But for the EU level, but also for the hyper local adaptation context, do you have some visionary thoughts, what you might like to see from governance, from land use decisions, from different projects for for that transitioning, for example, away for not completely away, we're probably not going to see in the immediate future transition away from monocropping, but to support more actors like you, to support more diversity, to support more hyper local adaptive projects. We know it's not impossible. I know you probably have a radar on for projects all over the world. There's, for example, Singapore with their, I can't remember what it's called, 30 for 30. They were depending so much on imports, and they saw that was an issue. So they're now government support for a lot of local agricultural projects, often very tech related. Or Cuba, for example, with what they've done with agriculture locally there. And in one of my recent readings, I saw that in the USA, in the last war, I think it was, the Victory Garden supplied, I think,
Yeah,
40%, that was of vegetables consumed nationwide. And that was supported by the government. Times were so different. That was, there was government, basically propaganda. I don't know if we want to call that propaganda, but
I think it was. Yeah.
there was a huge promotion, and 40% of the vegetables consumed were grown locally. We know it's possible. So I would love to end on a note with some visionary thoughts from you. You don't have to avoid talking about the challenges too, but what do you think could be really instrumental for the EU level, also for the hyper local adaptive level at different places across Europe, including your location,
Hmm.
for governance and land use decisions and participation and everything related?
Yeah. I think I want to go back to coming out of this box of set thoughts of what we think about agriculture, what we think about food, And because for example, for me as a farmer, I have studied horticultural sciences in Hungary. And what we need to do is like unlearn the things that are in the textbooks about how to grow vegetables, because that is not how things work anymore. That is not how to grow peas anymore. Like you have to forget that. And okay, you need to keep parts of them. You need to know the life cycle of plants, but like you need to be able to figure new things out. And I think what it always comes back to me for me too is like this, like two ideas that are, I think, misunderstood right now by a lot of people. And one of them is innovation. So in Hungary, innovation is always very high tech. It's something very expensive. Innovation is your brand new huge tractor for 2 million euros that goes without a driver by the GPS. But you know, for me, innovation is is also these kind of things that are happening in these little bubbles of small scale farms with their communities. It's also innovation to figure out a new way to grow peas. It's also innovation to figure out a new way to share your seeds with others, or to organize. For us, I think, like specifically for my garden, of how we organize labor, and how it's at the same time a community garden, but it's also something that provides salaries for people, and how we deal with the hierarchies with each other in a workspace or in a garden, you know? Like I think that's also all innovation. We're just like, I think the system is very monopolizing this idea of innovation, and then if we think about this as like agents of change, these little hubs of things that are very active, there are a lot of things are happening, then those are the things you need to support. And of course, I see projects, and there is a reason we work with Horizon 2020 projects, is because Horizon 2020 projects are not funded through Hungarian government, because we can be consortium partners without our government saying a thing about it. Because right now, any kind of civil activity, any kind of like this kind of environmental activism is not just not funded by the government, it's sometimes straight ahead, like, you know, pushed down and disabled. So it's yeah, it's something that you do these good things, and you try to like how far you go with self-censorship, or how loud you become in your activism is questions we have to face every day. And yeah, that is something I think that's interesting. And the other is the concept of efficiency. Again, like how many tons of wheat can you produce per hectare is one only, like this very like one morsel of efficiency. But what kind of negative or positive side effects does this kind of production have? And does it result in a healthy community? Does it result in a healthy diet? Like it's not just like a question of financial returns. And I think also, again, it's something very obvious in Hungary sometimes, that big farmers, like even efficiency, like they don't even care how many kilos or tons per hectare come off. It's only euros per hectare, you know? And then when the farmer is not interested anymore in growing food, then it's also a very big problem. Um, so yeah, I think like these two things are just things that I'm very like I'm thinking about these things a lot, and we're talking about these things a lot, and how to like really also like unlearn like a lot of things about what you like. Of course, at the bottom line, of course, it's important the financial gains, because you need to be able to pay the people who work with you or who work for you, and there has to be a positive balance. But I think it's just like we've kind of forgot a lot of other things that are important when you're running a business or a farm. And right now, it's also what we're seeing of what kind of role it plays in a community. Because there's no way that from my 2,000 square meters, I can feed this entire town, you know? I think that our role is to like maybe inspire others. I would be happy if the village had 5 other small farms like this, you know? And I think also this, what we see now, there's such like I sell out all my veggies all the time at the market, and everyone's like, "Oh, you should grow more." I'm like, "Yeah, you should grow more, like everyone else should grow more. Like there is only so much I can do." And what we see also that there is no competition between these small farms. Like we have communities, we have a network, we meet, we visit each other, we learn from each other. Like that's also a very new form of being. I think that okay, this is not your competition, even if we produce for the same markets, like we're not going to be the competition for each other for another 30 years because we're still not producing enough. So I should just these new ways of being. I think everyone should find some new way of being in the world, and instead of like be because I think Hungary and the world is like, it's a scary, shitty place right now. I'm sorry to say this, like this, but we see a lot of things that are happening that are scary, that are not going the way I think that supports community, that supports the environment, that supports like this kind of like a good livable life. And I think like the only thing you can do, the only thing you can have an effect on of how you again like hyper locally how you function in the world, what kind of relationship you have with your neighbors or your community, because that is where change really starts, because that is something that politics and doesn't really have a say about, like it cannot infiltrate it, hopefully.
No, I love that. I love what you're doing. I love that so much when people say, first of all, it's great you grow out your veggies. That's very inspiring. And then when people say you should grow more, I love your response. You should grow more. For me, that could be like a motto for a community farm because you should grow more because I love your idea that you wish more of your neighbors. Imagine if, yeah, just maybe 3 or 4 or 5 of your other neighbors were also growing. First of all, the local sustenance that builds, this is true resilience. Actually, I'm in my mind, I'm thinking of the cornfields now. I'm going to be thinking of that a lot. I'm a huge lover of corn. And this is going to be in my mind now, the fields you mentioned and, the stunted growth and how many years do all of us need to see that to say, hey, something's not working. And what a waste of land, what a waste of crops. And this idea that your neighbors could be growing more and imagine, yeah, you can even have a destination community market right there. People would come for it, I think, because it's novel too. I think people are yeah, often a lot of people maybe you've seen it too, and the gastronomic heritage changes this interest in locally grown, this and that.
Yeah.
It's definitely happening. And I think it's people like you who have the knowledge to also help educate others. And then also I think the consumer perspective is important. People that know there's better out there for them, that locally grown can bring better flavor, maybe that the difference between these store-bought heavy food mile items and locally grown. And then also the pride that is possible, I think, with that gastronomic heritage, I think is so important. So I could talk to you for a long time. I hope to someday maybe meet, have coffee, maybe.
Yeah, come visit.
Absolutely. I would love to dive into the local gastronomic heritage with you. Maybe we'll return. The Plus Change project will be going on for, I believe, another at least 2 years, right? It's
Yeah.
a 2-year project. So maybe we'll have a chance to revisit a talk in another season. Maybe now we're heading into winter, so it could be interesting to revisit you for a talk. Yeah, when the growing season's popping off, a different growing season. So I want to say thank you. This was really fascinating. I learned a lot. I hope listeners for this learned a lot. And I also really respect what you're doing and hope to
Thank
see you
you.
at the forefront of a lot more change. So thank you.